Thank you all for attending today, giving us a piece of your Thursday to attend today's TrenData sponsored webinar, how NLP and AI, some cute acronyms, natural language processing and artificial intelligence, will propel people analytics and HR. Start off with just kind of a brief overview of what we're going to cover today. We'll give you just the briefest description of who we are at TrenData, a little bit about what we do in the marketplace, and then we'll launch right into the meat of the presentation and talk about first, what is natural language processing, and talk a little bit about how it's evolved. Then we'll talk a little bit about the methodology behind NLP and how it's kind of different the way that than how computers and software have dealt with text and words before. And then we'll pivot into talk about some of the challenges within HR and what kind of environment human resources is like, and how NLP can help excel productivity in that environment. And then we'll move to the technology or the software part of it. First is discuss on an overview what this kind of technology wrapped in a people analytics solution can do for your organization. We'll do a brief demonstration of these capabilities within the TrenData software, and then we'll go from there and do a question session. Now, I've got everybody on mute on the call just because we tend to get a lot of feedback when we get audiences this big. So if you have a question during the presentation, just submit it through the chat, and I will cover them all at the end of the session. Okay, well, who is TrenData? Well, TrenData is a cloud-based platform company. We provide organizations the ability to generate advanced and predictive analytics, basically by aggregating multiple HR software applications. Most companies have more than one HR software application. You might have an HRIS system. You might have multiple talent systems, recruiting, performance. And you might also be bringing your financial compensation data in from either a payroll or a compensation system. So you generally have multiple areas where you're pulling information in, which is optimally valuable when it's on one platform and you can generate cross-filtered information. And with the historic depth of this information, we're able to then build models and allow you to actually not only show historical analytics, but also future predictive analytics. We are located in Plano, Texas. I have a little map up here. If you're familiar with Dallas or the DFW area, we are just a stone's throw north of the city of Dallas. So about a 20-minute drive straight down from Plano to downtown Dallas, but we are considered part of the DFW area. Our company, TrenData, we have a very deep history in the HR and talent software arena. I'm the CEO. I've been in HR software for over 15 years. And my co-founder, Mon Hamden, the chair of our advisory board, was actually the founder of HR Smart, a very successful talent management company. Launched that business along with Taleo and SuccessFactors back in the beginning of the century in the aughts. Most of our senior management has come from HR Smart, so we've got a lot of experienced HR people in our organization. We do have a very diverse customer base at TrenData, so if you're in finance, construction, healthcare, technology, whatever, we do have references if you decide down the line you wanted to talk to us further. Well, let's move into the presentation, the reason why we're all here, the topic at hand. Natural language processing. We'll start with that. So what NLP actually is, and this is a definition I got from a pretty renowned consultant over at the Meltwater Group, but really is it's treating text not like historically where it's just a computer recognizing a symbol on the screen, but it's where software and search technologies evolved into where they can actually consider the hierarchical structure of language to derive actual meaning from either the typed or spoken word. Now, this goes back, against a history of differences in human language. You know, we always talk about, you know, there's first of all a number of different languages on the planet. This is just a reference to biblical mythology where they have the Tower of Babel, and all of humanity was dispersed across the globe to speak different languages, and they weren't able to understand each other at this time and build the particular tower. But really, even within specific languages, there's so many different ways to say things. Noted Irish writer George Bernard Shaw always talked about the English and the Americans, two countries separated by a common language. So that's just kind of the fact that you know, even though the basic dictionary and glossaries might be the same, the way people convey things is often very different. Now, if you talk about today, what people do when they want to go out and find things, you know, 30 years ago, people would have, you know, gone to a library, gone to a library to look things up, or, you know, bought a newspaper or something. But today, the internet has made things very simple. You can simply go out to Google or one of the other high-powered search engines on the web, type in what you're looking for, and you know, you pretty much get to the information. Now, if you look at this particular example, and we'll kind of break this down to give you an idea of how search engines and the rudiments of NLP work, essentially what the most basic thing a search or an NLP engine does is it tags keywords within the phrases, so that you'll know if you see this word, go to here. Now, it's the very basics of an NLP support. But to go a little deeper, they're also programmed to look for root words within various tags. So, for example, you know, if you're not from the Northeast or maybe a different part of the country, you might not be used to pizzerias, but you just know you want to get pizza. So that the system is able to pick up not only pizzeria, but the actual thing of pizza. And also it's able to determine the entity. In this particular instance, we're looking for a place, not a who. So it's able to basically break down, tag words, determine entity, and get to the point where you're trying to get some pizza. So what it returns, if you Google, where can I order to a pizzeria, you get a ranking of relevant topics. So the first one there is an actual pizzeria. That's in the name. And that gives you the closest match to the actual query. The second one is not a pizzeria, but it's actually a place that offers pizza. And then you go down to the third and the last one, which is a place that actually claims to offer pizza. But I don't know if it was ranking it based on the quality of the pizza, but basically what it's looking at is hierarchically putting together you know, what you're looking for and giving you the best results. And then it also gives you a map as to, since I did ask for where the nearest ones are. So intelligent and evolved search just based on plucking off words. Now, advanced technologies in NLP are getting even smarter than that. They're at the point now where they actually break down sentences to an even greater extent. So, for example, you know, if I'm typing in a system, a more HR type query is, you know, how many days does it take to fill an open position? Now, there's a lot of things in there that could be determined differently if you were not looking at the sentiment. You know, how many is, you know, easy to break down. That's kind of an entity type. But, you know, take to fill. You know, if you weren't in HR, that could look at something and think more along the lines of, is it filling up a container? Is it filling up a glass, or things like that? So systems are trying to get more intelligent to be able to extract, you know, what exactly the idea, the intent is of the sentence. And then going even further, where if you, for example, have a sentence that maybe not as exact, so how many, as in the first example, is looking for a pretty exact number. The second one is a little more nuanced. First of all, it's kind of asking if there's a problem, and the search and the sentiments of the sentence say, okay, well, I am actually looking for something that's negative. So the search engines are able to kind of pick up on that type of thing. And also, though it's asking a question that's going to be a yes or no answer, the solution can also look at, you know, determining the expanse. Am I going to take someone to somewhere that just gives them a yes or no, or can I derive from the question that the searcher is going to want to go further than this first query? So a lot more intelligence is being built into these systems rather than just tagging keywords and very basic rudimentary stuff. What you're actually having is, real intelligence in the system to break down grammar and language rules. So the way it does all this is, of course, with an AI or an artificial intelligence engine in the background, and the system gets pushed full of glossaries or dictionaries of terms, as much grammatical rules as you can put in there, and of course the programming rules: if this, then that, and where do you go? So you put your search in through there, and it comes out, as we did in the pizza example, where you find that you have a number of results. But what makes the system more powerful as they go on is it actually uses what is taken from the result. So the first time you put it into the AI engine, it might rank it, as they say, result 1, 2, and 3 in that order. But if over a period of time, 70% of people are clicking on result 2, it's going to re-rank that system after a while, and result 2 is going to go to the top. Result 1 is probably going to go second, and if nobody's picking result 3, it's probably going to wash that from the search, and it feeds that information back into the system, and also out as it's going along the way. It picks up other things such as synonyms for what you're looking for, pasta, spaghetti, things like that. It can also start picking up things on languages, whether you're doing English, French, or Spanish. And then again, those slang or nuances or other ways of asking for a question, not just synonyms, but again, intent and other ways of communicating a thought. And of course, the more it does this repeatedly, the smarter the system gets, and also more information getting put into it. But most of it is feeding based on what the system is doing, and it's getting smarter just by having people use it. Now, as we pivot this, as I said, and talk a little bit about HR, I'd like to just kind of talk about what kind of data there is out there in HR. Like most environments, you've got a couple of different types of data, but probably most of HR data, 90% of it, is what you would consider structured data. That's data that's been organized into some sort of a repository. More specifically, I'd say it's information that is record-based. You've got a particular section of information per record. That's most commonly put in a database, which most HR systems are. But even something that comes from a flat file, a CSV or an Excel, since it's broken into those individual cells, is record-based and very structured and often easy to search. On the other side, you've got your unstructured data, which usually comes from legacy formats, but not always. You could have information such as performance reviews that have been filled out on Microsoft Word documents and stored in a shared space in the organization. You could have a system that collects email feedback on various things, not just people, candidates, but processes and stuff. And it might even get to the point where it's sophisticated enough where you have voices and text that are also being included. But I'd say that's probably 5 to 10% of the data, and the goal is to take that unstructured data, and you're not going to be able to turn it into record-based data, but turn it into semi-structured data by putting associated information close to it, and also doing this tag and intelligence stuff that we talked about in the the prior couple of slides. So you can take Word files and do much like you do with tagged information on the internet, so that any search will go and pick all that up, and also get to that basic intelligence of where it's determining sentiment and expanse and everything as it's searching what you're looking for. So when you again think about the universe of HR, there are a number of different glossaries of terms out there that are pretty standard. The HR Certification Institute, HCI, which people are often asking, is this webinar or this course accredited? HCI, a very renowned organization, they put out a glossary of HR terms. It's less than 600 terms. SHRMS is a little bigger, about 900. and most of them tend to be in this realm of less than 1,000 terms. Now, it might not seem as much as you think it would be, but when you look at all of these different terms, which could then become metrics, can be filtered by a lot of different qualifications. For example, you might have something high-level metrics such as salary, turnover, or something like that. But once you filter it by any one of 10 to 15 different ways, department, location, job level, things like that, all of a sudden this world gets exponentiated, and you're looking at a lot of different what could be terms and metrics, even though they're filtered down to various different. So the world does increase a lot, and the ability to be able to navigate through this to get the information you're looking for a particular function can be very important. So if you look at the internal logic of what's trying to be accomplished with natural language in a people analytics solution such as ours, often you'll get a query that is looking for a specific piece of information, which is usually a metric filtered by something. I'm looking for salary filtered by department or job level. So the first query the system asks is, is that metric already built? Yeah, we do have a salary metric in our system, and we have 10 or 15 filters that we use by it. It might take you 4 or 5 steps to get that going through a simple menu system, but what a natural language search allows you to do is, boom, take you right there and get you the information you need without having to remember how the menu system of the work or the logic of the flow, which, as easy as we've tried to make them over the years, people still forget if they're not on the system, every minute of every day. So first step is the logic of the natural language is to get you to the information that you're looking for quickly. Now the second phase is, okay, well, what if that metric is not built? Something in your system that's not constructed. Well, the first one is the data there to construct it? So you might have a good example would be you might have this year's salary and last year's salary, but you haven't built a metric for an average raise. So if you went and said, what is the average raise for an organization, you would then get back a query that gives you the answer and then says, do you want to keep this metric going forward? So if the data is there, the system can build it. If it's not there, then it has to query for information. So you might get a situation where you only have the first year, and you'd say, I need, the query of the system would be, no previous year salary information provided. And it can either send that back to the host system, or it can be input manually, but it has to communicate and automatically go and find that if it wants to build that metric. So kind of a very simple logic built on top of all that AI that's in the background. So when you look towards a software solution that would help you better do your job, how does it implement these AI capabilities, natural language and such? Well, the first it does, what we just described on the prior slide, is it'll get you to the information, whether it's top level or filtered metrics very quickly, so that you can get the information you need without having to constantly relearn the system if you're not on it all the time. It'll also allow you to build out a personalized dashboard. So once you find that information, do you want to have to go looking for it all the time, or you can just paste it to where you're going to log on and see it every day? And then there's kind of what answers that expanse question. So if you're going to go to something that is going to be a deeper drill than just a one answer, one question search, the ability to go to the analytics, which is trended metrics, to let you dig a little further into a particular problem. And then also the final step, which takes the further use of the AI engine, is the ability to let you do the modeling and predicting. So, okay, here's how things are today. This is how they are going historically. Looks like I have a problem. It's going to keep going into the future. What can I do to fix it? So, where the AI and the NLP gets you to the right information and then helps you fix the problem. So, kind of with that, I am going to just bounce out for a few minutes and give you a quick look at the TrenData solution. So here you have essentially a basic dashboard that you would log into every day in a people analytics solution. So what we have is a series of top-line metrics. All of these are for the organization as a whole. Revenue per employee, number of employees, source of hire. And if I wanted more top-line metrics, I could go into any one of these folders and add them to the main dashboard. So if I wanted to also include performance scores on my desktop, I can go ahead and do that. But to illustrate kind of the features that we were talking about, we could talk a little bit about, all right, so these are all nice, but I would like to have a compensation metric, but I don't just want average compensation for the whole company. I want compensation versus industry averages. And I would also like it broken down by job level. So that way I can compare how I'm compensating my executive versus executives and staff versus staff. So I do that search, it takes me to that metric, and it automatically breaks it down, defaults to the view that has versus industry averages and salary levels by various job level. And like I said, if that's something I want to see every day, I can then go and add that to my dashboard. And when I go back, I now have that metric as part of my dashboard, and I can play around with it and put it where I want or make it as large as I want. Now that's something I see every day as I log on. Let's go a little deeper, go to that second scenario. So suppose it's a metric that I don't have created. For example, if I wanted to see, what is my employee's average commute distance, and I type that in, so we don't have that metric built in the system, but we do integrate with Google Maps. So we're actually able to build that metric somewhat on the fly, and it'll produce a metric based on having the home and the office address of a particular individual, and it'll tell you how far away they are from the office by employee. And again, I can take that and add it to the dashboard as well. And as in the previous example, I can then take it down and move it around to whatever look I want to have on the dashboard. So these are just some simple examples of how you can quickly get to the information rather than going to my, for example, in this one, going to my salary metric by department, importing industry average. I have all that data, I can quickly get to it. I have that metric, so I can quickly get to it. Here, I don't have the metric, but I have the data, and I can quickly get to that. Now, kind of the next example that I want to point out is we talked a little bit about that expanse question. So, where was that question? Do I have a turnover problem? So a little bit more open-ended, but it's going to take me to the turnover metric, but it's also going to break it down in this instance by at least what it can assume is a breakdown of involuntary versus voluntary turnover. And it shows that I've had some turnover last month, and more than 2/3 of it has actually been voluntary. That's people leaving on their own rather than my company moving people out. So I can also then expand, since it's brought me to this view, and look at the analytics and see, has that been a problem over the last couple of months? Well, turnover has definitely been on the rise. And has that been a consistent problem also with separation type? And when we click on that, we can see, yeah, yes, it has. I've steadily seen an increase in my voluntary turnover, particularly with respect to turnover that was not voluntary. So again, this is another view I might want to add to my dashboard. So I can add this analytics view as well, adding it to my dashboard, and I can call it analytics, so I know that it's not just a pure metric. And I add this again to my dashboard, and now I have the ability to then add this and fill out my dashboard. So now I've got this sitting on my dashboard, and I can see what, and it'll keep updating as more information comes in. But now again, a little bit more on that problem of turnover. Has this gone on even longer? So let's go back to that particular view and see if right here, when turnover started to spike up in September and October, did anything in particular happen at that time that I might be able to correlate to that event? So I can go to my events overlay, and this allows me to combine things that have happened and align them with the trends. And I can see, well, right here, we acquired a company right at an inflection point where things started to spike up. So that's something that we could have envisioned as a problem. You know, if I'm a larger company and I want to see this as terms of percentage as well as value, I can always go and change it on the x-axis as well, and I can see the relationship stays the same. But then I can also go back and see, have I had this problem before? You know, I'm a large company, we've made other acquisitions. So let's go back and look over the last 5 years to see what's happened. And as we can see, back in 2015, we acquired a company, and lo and behold, turnover had spiked up then as well. What we did is we put some organizational initiatives in place. We instituted a raise that was above the industry standards. We put a telecommuting policy in place, and we also implemented a management training program. And the combination of all three, you know, seemed to have some effect of bringing things back down. Let's go into next the predictive view. So right now, if things keep going the way they are, where am I going to be in 6 months? So I click on the predictive view, and what it shows is, yes, things are going to keep climbing, and they're actually going to crest here at about a 5.5% monthly turnover, which is pretty high when you consider, if you aggregate that, that's about 60% or so a year. So I'm not quite happy with that scenario, so I'm going to see if I can do something about it. So right now, all along the way, this kind of view down at the bottom has just been showing all of the individuals in the current view. What I can do is also flip to our summary view, which shows you some high-level statistics along the lines of turnover. So it shows some things that relevant, you know, particular employees, average salary, those things that I worked with a few years ago. And it also shows, you know, the levels of turnover, you know, how much more recruiting I'm going to have to do, high performer versus non-high performer turnover, productivity loss and such. So let's see what I do if I can start modeling this. So based on the historical intelligence in the system from what we've done before, we have in the past, you know, done things with these three. These are things I can do. I can, as a CEO, I could change people's salaries. I could affect their work-life balance with remote employee availability and provide professional development. So it looks like, you know, right now the average for the entire company is about $136,000 salary a year. So if I'm knee-jerk reaction, suppose I wanted to go out and give everybody a, you know, basically a 6 or 7% raise and give them $5,000 more a year across the board. I change that to 141, and you can see that my turnover went from 5.5% to 5.36%, and I just spent $5 million. So probably not the return I was hoping for. So maybe, you know, I gave that money out in 2015. It might not have been the real reason people were leaving. So I'm going to hold off on that, put that back to where it was. The second item, I can see that the the remote employee option that I gave was pretty popular with the employees. We've got now about a little more than a third of our employees are working remotely. What if I let another 10% work remotely? So if I change this to 45, we can see turnover now went down over a full point, which is some good return there, and it didn't really cost me that much. But you can see that high performer turnover is still very high, and I can even look at this graphically using my drill down here, and it shows me, in fact, that the high performers you know, aren't quite as big on the remote as the non-high performers, but I might want to keep that in place. But really, if I go to this third bullet, I can see possibly where the real culprit is. Even though I implemented a management training program, whether managers have been stingy about putting their employees in it, or maybe there's just something bureaucratic in the company that we haven't really put that up the way we should. Less than 7% of my high performers are actually in professional development. That might be the key why I have such a high rate of turnover. So what if I bump that, say, to 15% going forward? Now you can see that the high performer turnover will be projected to go down by more than half. And the system kind of recommends that I keep raising that going forward to keep getting the amount of return I can. And you get to the point where high performer turnover is almost down to a negligible amount and is much lower than overall turnover. So that's the big change I can make, and the big thing that the system has learned from my past actions. So just finally, I'm going to go back to the dashboard, and as you can see, we've got the full dashboard filled out. We've used the natural language to navigate around the system. A quick look at just where does the data come from. So the system is, as I talked about, is designed to pull information in from multiple data sources. These are just some sample ones that we've done in the past. But basically any ERP system, HR system, we can pull in from data from. We also provide kind of a very easy file upload system with our TUF file, the TrenData Universal File Format. And what this is basically a CSV file that allows you to do a dump from one of your major systems or combine a couple of files. And if you can get these 50 or so fields out of your system, you can use our 18 out-of-the-box metrics right off the bat. Be able to filter them, drill down on them, use the natural language search and everything to really get off the ground and even test the system. We do offer it on a trial basis. So, you can bring in data from multiple sources, but it's a quick and easy way for you to get up and going. Okay, enough for the commercial there. But let me jump back to the system, to the presentation rather, and move on to the next portion. So I'd asked anybody if they had any questions. I also got a few, one in particular before the presentation today that was somewhat relevant, but not totally germane to the pub, but it was a good question that I wanted to ask, because one person asked, does a passage of the GDPR provide an advantage or disadvantage to companies in this area? So for those of you who aren't familiar, but it's the European Union is putting in place a general data protection regulation, which actually goes into effect tomorrow, May 25th, 2018. And this is putting new types of projections and a whole a lot of emphasis on cloud-based data. So the question was, how does this affect our particular area? So I assume the question was for cloud vendors. So I kind of got a pro and con answer. One, for example, more regulation and scrutiny is always slows things down, because not only do you have to provide information, you have to provide it in a certain format. But from the stand of B2B cloud companies, I stress the B2B, which is companies like ourselves, Workday, SAP, where we sell to businesses. We've been answering these questions for a long time. Where's your database? Who has access to it? What protections are in place? So with that particular history, I would say that business-to-business cloud companies are actually the most prepared for this, because companies have been asking us these questions all the time. As we're on-premise-based software has not been as often as much. And to distinguish B2B companies from B2C, which are business to consumer, where you're tending to go outside of the wall of the company's information, where protections haven't had to be in place, or an individual signs on to Facebook, they don't have to fill out a whole internal data policy for a company they're selling to. So I'd say I'd say more data and regulation always tends to slow things down again. But business to business companies, and I've been doing this since I sold WebEx back in 2002, 2003. The type of questions that the GDPR is actually asking are ones that cloud-based vendors have been addressing for quite a period. So yeah, it'll slow things down, but in the end, it's not as big a thing. I do have some, looks like I have some other questions on chat. One was, we saw that you use salary benchmark data. Do you provide that, or do we have to provide that? Either. We do provide salary benchmark data. So if you want us to populate that to the system, we can do that as well. We can also import, if you get it from salary.com, Mercer, any of the other big providers out there, Aon, we can import that in as well. We do also provide other type of benchmark information if you want to compare your turnover rates versus those in the industry and things. We can always get those and provide them, or use any that you provide. There's a question on the type of, on the imports of the data. So, I did show you that we can bring in data from multiple systems. When it's, we have the flat file, which is the legacy upgrade. When we bring in data from, an SAP or a Workday or something like that, generally we build an API through an API, an application programming interface that would, make calls to the system, pull the data in, and pretty much make it real time. We also can do an ODBC connection, which is kind of an older technology, but is pretty pervasive out there, particularly for maybe some older systems. But what we found is most systems have an API, but if you don't, we have the ODBC connection, open database connection, and we can always do the flat file. But usually, most systems have the API, so we can build things in real time. Looks like we got, we give an idea what the cost for this type of product is. We can talk about that a little offline, but we do give the opportunity for a very inexpensive entry point. So we can sell this system for one user. If you just want to kind of pilot it in your HR department, we can have a very reasonable price for one user to bring all the data in and use it. And then as you expand through HR and finance, and what the belief is that this type of system you would eventually roll out to your line managers and key decision makers in your organization, so they can see what the key drivers are of workforce performance. We'll reach out and we can give you some more information, but there's a very low entry point that allows you to get into the system inexpensively, and we're conscious of wanting to be able to let you do something before you have to put it into the budget. So I do have one more. That's a good question. Does your NLP search the external systems or just within your platform? Well, it's what it does is initially searches the data that's been imported into our platform. But if you have these API connections to your external systems, we are able to, if you make the call, if the data is not there, it can make the call to the source system and then have that data imported. So we can set up that type of logic, or it might just go to an administrator and say, hey, send over this information, the second year salary, whatever, so that we can, computate average raise or whatever. So, a lot of good questions today. So I think that's pretty much all I have. I will leave and just let everybody know that we do offer a 45-day trial of the system. So, oh, I did get another question on implementation. So implementation time frame, generally, if you're going to use the flat file, we can get a basic implementation up in couple hours. You would just write a report or multiple reports from your various systems. We can combine them into a TUF and upload them. But if you're setting up connections with various systems, we generally quote about 6 to 8 weeks implementation time. It's not very quick. It's not very long. Rather, the implementation of an engine like this, since it's really mostly pulling data one way, the integrations are not as difficult. Definitely not the length of an ERP system or most of your common SaaS systems. And the nice thing about it is you can get up going with the tough almost instantly and be using that as we then build out the integration. So you can get you can start getting real good use out of the system right away, and then expand your usage to both data sources and individuals. So once again, thank you for that good question. And I did point out that we do have a trial available for the system, that we can let you use it with the tough file. We don't ask for a signed contract, and we will give you a customer-like support to get into the system. So please, if you would like to take advantage of this trial, just send an email to marketing@TrenData.com. And I would also ask if you use this promotional code. I mean, we won't turn you down if you don't, but we always like to know where the source of the lead came from, so it can track us to do more of these or do less of these or whatever. So okay, well, great session. Thank you again, everybody, for attending. I did mention, I think, at the beginning, but once again, we will make this session available through a recording on our website. It'll be up in about a day or two. This recording will be up, and you can, if you want to share it with anybody else in your organization, along with all of the other past webinars we've done, are available at TrenData.com, and you would go into the resources and the events tab. So thank you again very much for your time. I wish everybody has a great Memorial Day weekend, and hopefully we'll talk to all or some of you again in the future. Thank you, and have a good day.